Hello, Bernie.
Hello, Tom. What's the rumpus?
Of all the filmmakers working today, Joel and Ethan Coen may be among the most distinctive. Their filmography may be eclectic, taking in screwball comedy, gritty westerns, taut thrillers, and even the occasional big musical set piece. But genre cinema and its tropes are essentially just suits fresh off the peg that the brothers slip into. Instantly recognizable costumes, sometimes a snugger fit than others, but just an exterior shaped by the figure of the brothers wearing them. There is some debate about which of their works is their best film, with perhaps the only consensus being that it isn't Intolerable Cruelty.
Where were we?
She said that she required a husband. Oh, do you want some bones? Does Elsbeta want some bones? Has anyone any bones? Hard, crunchy bones
Right.
for the...
And most seem to fall somewhere between Fargo and No Country for Old Men, or for some, the remake of True Grit. Perhaps because those are the films where they draw the least attention to themselves as the authorial voice. Something which I feel is still serving a specific purpose, but perhaps I'll get into that in another video somewhere down the line. My favourite of their films is Miller's Crossing, a darkly funny, often brutal gangster flick, where the plot twists and turns like a flapper in an illicit nightclub. The dialogue flows like malt whiskey, and you can almost feel the gin and rum seeping from the pores of every sharply drawn but murkily motivated character. A film that is their masterpiece precisely because no one else could have made this movie. Noir just the mash for this consummately crafted Cohen moonshine. I don't even know where to begin with this film, so I'll begin with the opening, which so strongly recalls the first scene of The Godfather that I've seen it called outright theft.
You were afraid to be my dad.
But for me, this is a use of cinematic language as shorthand for the viewer. You know this scene, you know this dynamic. You are plugged into the narrative immediately. This is, at worst, efficient filmmaking, and I wouldn't draw attention to it at all if that's all it was. The bulk of the scene is rising hoodlum Johnny Casper delivering a monologue that sets out the core narrative of the film. He wants to kill the bookie who has been selling out his fixed fights.
You sure it's Bernie selling you out?
It ain't elves.
But while he is delivering the MacGuffinatory exposition, the Coens are telling us everything about the main characters. Johnny Casper, the little man with a big mouth, yapping away like a worked-up Boston Terrier, newly found economic power projected by his pristine dapper threads. Looming over his shoulder like the Grim Reaper, his muscle, Eddie Dane. Opposite them, Leo, the granite heart of the city, barely seeming to listen or maybe care.
So it's clear what I'm saying.
As mud.
And behind him, Tom Regan, the brains of the operation, Merlin to Leo's Arthur. A clockwork mind fueled by booze that never stops grinding, magic expressed through a shrug and a swirl of his half-empty glass. While Casper literally tells us the plot, the Coens show us who these characters are and who they are to each other. There are even little touches like opening on Tom's whiskey glass as ice cubes clink into it, Casper's voice in the distant background telling us where our attention should be. And when we cut to Casper speaking, Tom remains in shot, out of focus in the background, just where he likes to be, drawing our focus with the soft jingle of ice dancing in his glass. We don't need to see Gabriel Byrne's name first on the credits to know that our attention should be on him, and that his attention is first and foremost on his next drink. These are all simple little techniques and again efficient filmmaking. You've likely seen similar across hundreds of films. But the magic of the Coens is not simply the efficiency, with every shot in the film telling you something about these characters, about the setting, about the narrative, but also functional, using the language of cinema to create moods, build tension, and occasionally explode into mania.
Always put one in the brain!
And on top of that, it is sumptuous, a perfectly mixed gin gimlet for the eyes. A film where every frame could be the cover of a long-forgotten and heavily dog-eared pulp noir novel. Even a simple scene featuring none of the main characters that in most films would be part of a montage or throwaway action set piece is crafted with the utmost care, such as the segment where the police raid one of Leo's clubs. The Coens give us the Little Sam Raimi cameo, have him shoot an unassuming schmo waving a white flag, not so subtly showing us that he's a complete bastard, and we then watch as this complete bastard gets his comeuppance. This not only creates an emotional investment in the scene, and definitely delivers a payoff, but also tells us that Casper's men are breaking his supposedly ethical rules, and that Leo's men are fighting back hard even against the toughest odds. There is a purpose to every shot, every line. Miller's Crossing is a film that is all muscle and no fat. This is also an example of how every character in the film, from the most important to those with barely a line, are made to feel like the Coens have crafted a whole backstory for them, that they are the main character of a different movie happening parallel to this one. Everyone has a distinct look and a feel, distinguishing tics and verbal cadences. This is really achieved through cinematic shorthand and a slightly caricaturish recreation of hard-boiled staples. But this is a care that so few filmmakers actually take, yet alone commit to through every perfectly manicured frame. After watching this film, you would not only be able to pick almost every character out of a lineup, but you'd know them by name. Johnny Casper, the Dane, O'Doul and the Mayor, Mink LaRue, Rug Daniels, Flop Johnson, and the single greatest character name in cinema history, something which the Coens absolutely knew as they were making it, Bernie Birnbaum.
Every time I lay in bed with his son of a bitch, Bernie Birnbaum.
Bernie Birnbaum.
All you gotta do to show you're a friend is give me Bernie Birnbaum.
You bumped Bernie Birnbaum.
Bernie Birnbaum.
You didn't see Bernie Birnbaum before he was shown across.
I could do this endlessly, dig into every scene and marvel at the care taken. But the craftsmanship of the film as a piece of cinema is just the lavish speakeasy built upon the sturdy foundations of the film's tightly sculpted script. From the plot, which shoves Dashiell Hammett's The Glass Key and Red Harvest into a cocktail shaker of genre tropes, poured into a dirty whiskey glass over ice, a muscular blend of tough guys, double crosses, complications and contrivance, a perfect pastiche able to stand alongside any of the stories it's aping, and the dialogue, tightly wound and sinewy, not a syllable out of place, the quaintly dated slang overwrought simile and reliance on cheap contrivances like alliteration and repetition of a 1930s noir potboiler, wrestled like a Wallace Beery picture into the cadence and metre of a Shakespearean soliloquy.
You mightn't like it, but giving up Bernie Birnbaum is a pretty small price to pay for peace. Business is business, and a war is going to hurt everybody. Bernie plays with fire, he's got to deal with the consequences, even if that means he gets bumped off.
Most films aren't written like this, and for good reason. It is dialogue that draws attention to itself as dialogue. But that was always true of noir too. The success of Raymond Chandler, a man who never saw a nighttime street that wasn't deserving of an extended simile, leading to a litany of lesser copycats incapable of matching his peerless prose. And the Coens may in effect be copycats, although I look at Miller's Crossing more as a tribute to the films and novels that were clearly a huge influence on the brothers. But they are far from lesser. They are master craftsmen at the very top of their game, recreating a classic genre, imbuing it with their personal style and filling it with a uniquely American poetry.
I get you, smart guy. I know what you are. Straight as a corkscrew. Mr. Inside-Outski like some goddamn Bolshevik picking up his orders from Yegg Central.
You hang on this dialogue, speeches sing with the staccato of a machine gun, witty barbs flit through the air and wry sarcasm lands with a thud.
Rug Daniels is dead.
Gee, that's tough.
Don't get hysterical.
Which in turn makes it even more powerful when the dialogue stops.
She was with me. The night Rug was following her. The night you dropped by.
The Coens draw attention to the craft, to the artifice, because this is not simply a film noir. It is a film about film noir. A commentary on the form, its attitudes and its cliches. This may range from playful undercutting of the obvious tropes of the genre, like which one of Frankie and Tic Tac is handy in a dust-up, to maybe slightly tougher pills to swallow. It is a staple of noir that our lead character may resolve the conflict at the heart of the narrative, may solve a mystery that can often be underwhelming.
What did Mink shoot Rug anyway?
I don't know. It's just a mix-up.
But there is very rarely a happy ending for the lead character in the world of noir fiction. And to get into this, I'm also going to get into a question that many have asked of the film since release. What does the hat mean?
Where's my hat?
According to cinematographer Barry Sonnenfeld in an interview you can find here on YouTube, the Coen Brothers wanted Miller's Crossing to be a handsome movie about men in hats, and you have to admire the playful simplicity and humility of that description. Gabriel Byrne claims he asked the Coens on set what the meaning of the hat was, and their reply was, "Whatever you want it to be, it is." I like that too, because even if they have their ideas and they are using the medium of film to convey them, once a viewer makes contact with a work of art, it becomes theirs. If someone wants to think the hat represents fate or Tom's soul or is a manifestation of Leo, go for it, I guess. But what do I think the hat represents? Well, let's not start with the narrative, let's start with the object. Why a hat? Classic noir was replete with hats, and the hat you wear tells us a lot about your role in the narrative. In many ways, the Coens are largely just being true to the form. The gangsters have their battered fedoras, O'Doul his policeman's peaked cap, Casper's cousins bowlers that represent their desire to be well-heeled and respectable civil servants. The hat tells us not just about the role these characters play or want to play, but status. Even the metaphorical hats of the film.
And I'm sick of getting the high hat.
That ain't friendly, kid. I make you a nice offer. You give me the high hat.
See, last time we jawed, you gave me the high hat. What is this, the high hat? And I'm sick of the high hat!
Are about roles and status, referring to the top hat best known for adorning the heads of the upper classes, literally taking as an insult the idea of not being equals in these same hats, of someone assuming higher status, looking down their nose at you, treating you with contempt. In many ways, this is a simple trope of filmmaking and, beyond that, of play, of make-believe. Put on the right hat and you are that role. That's literally how Paw Patrol works. Stick a red hard hat on an anthropomorphic dog and your kid instantly knows they are supposed to be a firefighter. In American cinema, perhaps the best known hat is the cowboy variety, the preserve of tough, rugged men, the traditional American heroism of John Wayne and Gary Cooper. And when that type of film became passé, subverted by revisionist westerns, we still had films like 1973's Electra Glide in Blue, Robert Blake's diminutive highway patrolman wanting nothing more than to swap his helmet for the 10-gallon detective hat, or 1968's Coogan's Bluff, where Clint Eastwood's veteran Arizona sheriff finds himself in New York pursuing a fugitive, a situation that puts him at odds not just with the wrongdoers in his way, but with a softer modern society, and where only his old-school machismo will get the tough jobs done. Yes, Clint Eastwood was always like that. People just didn't notice. The hat of 20th century American cinema in noir and westerns is a symbol of masculinity, a representation you make to others of your role and status in these tough, hard worlds, where men are men, dames are dames, and the only two things you want in your hand are a cold gun and a square shot glass holding 2 fingers of cheap bourbon. In the world of Miller's Crossing, where appearances are everything, where people are defined by how they look, there is nothing more important than your hat. I don't need to slavishly go through the film and make the same point over and over. Tom losing his hat in a card game, and to a dame no less, placing it between him and Casper as they negotiate, having it tumble down the stairs in front of him as he takes a beating from the old man, sliding it onto his head even before grabbing his gun as an attempt at action goes sour, having it snatched from his noggin and tossed into the distance as the Dane looks to put 2 slugs in his cranium. It's not a direct analogue, it's symbolic of masculinity as a presentation to the world.
And no, I didn't chase it.
Nothing more foolish than a man chasing his hat.
When people talk about masculinity in the Coen films, they almost always focus on The Big Lebowski, a postmodern neo-noir that subverts the form by placing a permanently stoned dropout at the centre of its narrative. But all of their films, to greater or lesser extents, have a fragile or warped masculinity at their core, driving bad choices, creating conflict, or just being as dumb as a pair of balls. They have also occasionally juxtaposed their cavalcade of idiotic men with smart and unassuming women who are underestimated. But you don't need that to comment on masculinity, and in Miller's Crossing, they don't. This is not masculinity in contrast to anything. It is masculinity as performance, where all that matters is how other men perceive you.
Last night made you look vulnerable. You don't hold elected office in this town. You run it because people think you run it. Once they stop thinking it, you stop running it.
The narrative of the film is kick-started by Johnny Casper needing to kill a bookie who has double-crossed him as a message to others who may feel so inclined. The gang war swings into full gear because Leo feels slighted by the wrongly attributed murder of Rugg Daniels.
Sweet Jesus, Tom, that ain't even the point anymore. Casper poop Rugg. The day I back down from a fight, Casper's welcome to the rackets, this town, and my place at the table. I didn't start this thing. You did start.
And Bernie back in town and sour on Tom, because he'll be damned if any man's last memory of him will be with his tail between his legs.
I guess I made kind of a fool of myself out there.
boiling away like a twist. I guess I turned yellow. You didn't tell anyone about that?
No.
Of course, you know about it.
Masculinity in Miller's Crossing is more than pride for its own sake. It's a performance, a two-bit pantomime, sure, but it's the only show in town and everyone has bought their ticket. In terms of women in the film, there are, by my count, 3 who have any lines. Casper's wife, Frances McDormand's secretary, and the absolutely phenomenal Marcia Gay Harden as Verna. This is not a women's world, and where they exist they are the flimsy archetypes of the mother, the secretary, and the femme fatale. This isn't a failure of the film, it's drilling into the core of classic noir. Epic dick-measuring contests played out in bars and alleyways. Dames reduced to hair colours, blondes, brunettes, and redheads, getting in the way and complicating things. Miller's Crossing presents noir as a world created completely by, and completely in service to, masculinity. It is a handsome film about men in hats. Because what else was noir? What else was hard-boiled detective fiction? A world where you can only fix one problem at a time, and where nothing changes even if you do. Our heroes, men who barely have anything else to show for themselves besides their manhood, who have long since given up on a happy ending they know will never come. Small cogs in a contraption too big for them to even ponder. A machine that exists solely to grind them down. Their only goal to keep spinning for one more day, and lose the night at the bottom of a bottle. You could point at Verna, but Verna isn't a counterpoint. Tom has her right, she's a grifter, someone who finds herself in this world and is just doing whatever she can to get by.
What's wrong with her wanting her brother taken care of?
Nothing. I don't blame her. She sees the angle, which is you. She plays it. She's a grifter. Just like her brother. Probably had grifter parents and grifter grandparents, and someday they're each going to spawn little grifter kids.
In fact, we see Verna, the femme fatale, not through the eyes of the one seduced by her, but through the eyes of someone who is exactly the same as she is. A cynical grifter, a man who lies when he needs to, is silent when he knows to, and drops the truth on you like a slug from the Dane's Webley top-break revolver when he feels like it.
What did you tell Leo?
I told him you were a tramp and he should dump you.
Does Tom sleep with Verna so he can swerve her away from Leo? Because he's horny?
If I'd known we were going to cast our feelings into words, I'd have memorized the Song of Solomon.
Or for no particular reason at all?
I don't know. Do you always know why you do things, Leo?
We don't know, just that he's a gambler in a world of fixes. With rotten luck, sure, but there's always the next hand. And if winning and losing look the same, no one can tell if you're bluffing. And that's Tom through and through. The game, the play, the gamble. As pure a grifter as ever there was. A man who rolls the dice and sees where they land. A man who sees the angles best when he's behind the 8-ball. A man who tells himself he has no heart, and he might just believe it. He does seem to have a fondness for Leo, though. And you could even argue that everything he does in the film stems from that. Sleeping with Verna, taking out Casper, hell, if you told me the reason he doesn't shoot Bernie in the woods is solely because Leo said he didn't want him dead, I couldn't argue. Counterintuitive and twisted, but perfectly in character for someone who thinks the good in people is a weakness. It's more likely than him being able to predict the events of the rest of the film perfectly. This isn't an episode of Moffat and Gattis's Sherlock.
Basically, he trashed himself on drugs so that you'd help him, so that you'd have something to do, something doctory. You get that now, though.
And no less likely than Tom acting out of stubborn pride, never doing what anyone tells him to as a point of principle, or simply just never wanting to get his hands dirty. Hell, when Tom shows surprise that Leo wants to protect Bernie. Is that even real? Or a performance for Casper? A poker face is useful, but so is letting people think they have a tell on you, when they are really just whistling in the breeze. If Frankie and Tic Tac had dragged Bernie to a clearing in Miller's Crossing and bumped him off, so be it. At least he didn't do it himself. If Casper and Leo's gang war ends with Leo cold and stiff on a slab, it's not the perfect ending, but Tom's found himself a nice perch on Johnny Casper's shoulder, and that's the next best thing. Tom is a guy who is always playing all the angles. It's all he knows how to do. It's the hat he wears, and he looks damn good in it. He navigates the world with the hand he is dealt, the same way Leo uses his fists and the Dane uses his gun. Tom uses his head. But Miller's Crossing isn't simply a film about masculinity. In fact, it tells us what it's about with the very first line of the film.
I'm talking about Frank.
Tom tells us more than once that nobody knows anybody. Not that well. But he does know people. He can read them like a book and play them like a fiddle. And as much as Tom feels friendship, he feels it towards Leo. Leo is far from a positive representation of masculinity himself. But what even is when that means winning or losing with nothing in between? He's someone who doesn't think before they act, someone who, when they do act, almost always does so with his fists, literally and metaphorically.
I reckon I can still trade body blows with any man in this town. Except you, Tom.
But someone who sees the best in people, who is willing to fall in love even if it is with a complete grifter. Someone who genuinely shows Tom the love he maybe doesn't deserve. Someone who inspires genuine loyalty in those who follow him.
Leo said that as well.
No, I said that. Cross Leo next time, I'll say plenty.
While Casper's men seem to tolerate his nonsense because of the perks he brings.
That way, you get a first-class shave every time.
Okay, Johnny. Ain't it the life, though?
A tough guy, but a damn fool. A big-hearted lug whose pride will see someone get the better of him one day. But not today. Not if Tom has anything to say about it. Maybe it started as a grift, maybe Tom just played the role so well it became a habit. But in a film where friendship is a euphemism for doing business.
I want everybody to be friends. I do this. You're friends with Lazar, he's friends with you, you're friends with me.
The point is I can help you with your debts if that would make us friends. My motto is, a guy can't have too many.
No one really cares, do they? His friends didn't really like him.
He didn't like his friends.
Where everyone is using everyone, where trust is for suckers and a double-cross waits at the end of every alleyway. The relationship we follow, the relationship that is the only thing Tom seems to think is worth taking risks for, the relationship we are left feeling sadness for when it doesn't work out, is the friendship between Leo and Tom. But for Tom, the smart play is in the middle, playing everyone off against each other, ready to raise the arm of the victor and tell them you planned it all along. All you can do is stack the deck as best you can and hope the flop gives you a winning hand. Tom is an absolute heel, a grifter who doesn't learn or grow, who does the right thing only when it's convenient for him. Come the end of the film, he's exactly the same as he was at the start, as cold as the ice in his whiskey, figuring the angles and, literally in this instance, hiding behind his hat. The performance of masculinity he makes to the world. Before the Coen's camera zooms in, taking us beneath that presentation, allowing the audience to see what he is choosing to hide. An unmistakable sadness as he watches his one true friend in a world where no friends are true, walk off into the mists of Miller's Crossing. And Leo too, who allowed himself to be vulnerable enough to beg Tom to come back and work for him, simply pops his hat back on his head, burying any regret he feels beneath that same masculine exterior. Back to the grind they go, their friendship a wistful memory they'll spill at some point in the future when they've had a few too many and feel like yapping. The last scene of the film is our two main characters literally putting their hats on to hide their pain. Masculinity as a representation to the world, a facade masking your weaknesses, and a salve as sure as whiskey and headache powder. Because that is the only play there is in the world of Miller's Crossing. A world of tough guys and double crosses, crooked cops and public servants with their hands in the till, of bootleg booze and licit firearms, where friendship is a euphemism and relationships are a transaction, where a strong code of ethics still sees you needing to whack a double-dealing bookie, because you can't let a slight drift. There are no happy endings in the world of noir fiction. What would a happy ending even look like? You either end up worm-feeding a box or live long enough to wish you were. The story ends, but nothing changes. Miller's Crossing is indeed a handsome movie about men in hats, and the ugly world they created for themselves by never taking those hats off. Thank you very much for watching. If you listened to this, you've made it all the way to the end. Thank you. If you enjoyed this, please like and share the video. Don't forget you can subscribe to watch future videos. And if you haven't, maybe check out some of my other videos. If you have any comments or feedback, please comment below, and hopefully I'll see you next time.